Welcome everyone to today's webinar, Communities Mobilizing to Build Youth Futures, with Melody Barnes and the Honorable Bardish Chagger. Brought to you by us, the Tamarack Institute's Vibrant Communities and Cities Reducing Poverty and the Communities Building Youth Futures initiative. I want to also give a huge thanks to the Ministry of Employment and Social Development for supporting this work. My name is Paul Bourne. I'm the co-CEO of Tamarack Institute. I have the honor of introducing today's guest speakers. First, Melody Barnes. While Melody Barnes was leading the White House Domestic Policy Council under President Barack Obama, the DPC was supporting the work of the White House Council on Community Solutions with Honorary Chair Michelle Obama and leaders from the private, nonprofit, and philanthropic sectors. Tamarack was following that work closely, and it was disseminating their ideas to learners all across Canada. Two key recommendations of that council were to focus on solutions for opportunity youth whose futures had stalled in or after high school, and to ensure that every community was able to access a collective impact approach to community change. She left the White House to chair the prestigious Aspen Institute Forum for Community Solutions and co-founded the Opportunity Youth Incentive Fund that has supported more than 1 million youth to realize opportunities for ending poverty and building better futures. I think you know just by that last part of her bio why the Honorable Bardish Chagger would love to talk with her. And it's a real honor to bring them together here today. The Honorable Bardish Chagger is the Federal Minister of Diversity and Inclusion and Youth, and was previously leader of the government in the House of Commons. In 2012, now this is a while back, but not really, she was recognized as one of 40 under 40 who would lead the region of Waterloo. It's the head office of the Tamarack Institute that would lead the region of Waterloo into the future. Minister Chagger, or as we know her in our hometown, Bardish, has supported elections and was involved in the democratic process since she was 13 years old. She is a local legend, and we are so thrilled to have her join us today. Welcome, Minister Chagger and Melody. Thank you for joining us on today's webinar. I'll now hand it over to you, Minister Chagger, to lead the interview.
Thank you, Paul, so much. It's Bardish, and it's always an honor and a privilege to be with you. Yes, we are joining each other virtually today, so that kind of isn't as exciting, but at least we're keeping healthy and safe, and that's always the priority. And as you know, I am really looking forward to this exchange. I want everyone watching to know that I'm joining you from Waterloo, Ontario, the community that I've been born and raised in, the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee, Anishinaabeg, and Neutral people. C'est vraiment un plaisir d'être ici parmi vous cet après-midi pour cette belle conversation avec Melody Barnes. And I want you all to participate in this exchange. So if you're able to jump into the chat, let me know how you're feeling. What's on your mind? If I could pick one word right now, it would be excited. I want to broaden my horizons with this exchange. And after Melody and I get to speak, you'll get to participate and ask questions as well. And we will do our best to ensure that they are all answered. So with that, I'll turn the screen over to Melody Barnes.
It's such a pleasure to be here with you all this morning or this afternoon now. And it's such a pleasure to meet you, Bardish. Thank you so much for agreeing to be in conversation with me this afternoon. I'm excited to learn more about what you all are doing in Canada on a federal level, on a national level, which I think is really exciting. I think there are wonderful synergies between your work and our work and ways that we can learn from one another leapfrog over challenges by learning from one another, and to do the best work that we possibly can for opportunity youth in both of our countries. So I'm looking forward to our conversation. And I want to thank Paul and Tamarack for inviting us to be together today, and also looking forward to being together several months from now in the spring as well.
I like how you've reminded ourselves that our work here together is part of this journey, and it's going to continue. And I love your humbleness. But I have to say, Melody, as the director of Domestic Policy Council, you supported the White House Council on Community Solutions. And so I want to know a little bit about that work and how the council landed on the focus area of opportunity, youth, and collective impact. I ask that because in Canada, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau was the first Minister of Youth. And we believe that youth belong at the decision-making table because they're not only the leaders of tomorrow, they are the leaders of today. And for the first time, we have a youth policy. So would love to know kind of how you landed as to where you started and then where you've come to.
Sure. That's a great question. Well, it seems like just yesterday in many regards, but when you think back to 2008, 2009, and we were first moving into the White House, President Obama, and we were in the midst of the Great Recession, huge economic crisis that we all know and live through. And we established a White House Council for Community Solutions because as we were trying to solve the problems of the country, President Obama said, look, all the smart solutions are not going to be found in Washington, D.C. In fact, we have to get out into communities, into towns and cities, and better understand how they're solving their challenges. So the brief of this council was to do that work, to understand why certain communities had been successful in addressing big social challenges. In the course of doing that, they studied a number of communities, and they first identified what we now know as collective impact, a way for cross-sector collaboration to work in communities to bring people together to solve these big challenges. And they identified places like Nashville, Tennessee, that had a huge challenge with high school dropouts. And they were able to address that in a significant way. They looked at communities like Milwaukee, Wisconsin, that realized that they had a significant teen pregnancy problem. And again, using that strategy, they were able to begin to address that problem. And over time, we've seen significant decreases in both of those cities. But in doing that, the council also said, we don't want to just study this problem generally. We also want to bring what this lens that we now see as successful to a particular issue. And after talking to young adults, particularly in the age range of 16 to 24, who had faced significant challenges, homelessness, really in many cases, awful foster care placements, dramatic trauma in their lives, loss of a parent, drug use, the list goes on. They were finding that these young people still felt very optimistic about their future and believed that they had a great deal to contribute to the community, to building their families, to being a force in the country. And they decided, let's work not just for, but with these young people to set the stage for change using the strategy of collective impact. And that's what began this work.
I'm curious to know because, and I love the fact that youth were so optimistic. Would love to know because there's always that disconnect between young people and government. Things aren't always relevant. So how did you create those relationships, build that trust to actually have those conversations, and also just consciously making sure that people who are far too often left behind were part of these conversations?
Sure. Well, the work of the council, the White House Council itself included 26 really interesting group of Americans, business leaders, philanthropic leaders, those who worked with nonprofits, and some of us from government as well. And these were people who cared very deeply about the young people that they encountered and built relationships with them. I remember the day that the council submitted its report to the president, we went to the home of the chair of the council, and they brought in young people from all over the community to engage and to celebrate this moment. So it was the beginning of the building of a relationship of trust. But we also recognized that though we had identified this issue as a significant one that the government and that communities should focus on, that we were building on the shoulders of those who had been doing this work for quite some time. There are a lot of people and organizations that had been focused on these issues, but we also realized, and in conversation with them, that while we were program rich, a lot of really wonderful programs, we were also system poor, meaning that while we were solving problems for 20 young people or 200 young people, or maybe even 2,000 young people, we had a challenge that was facing 9 million young people or more. So we had to start to think about systems change and doing this at scale and bringing in the government, and at the same time engaging the government with other sectors of society, the business community, the nonprofit community, the education community, and more. So we started with this relationship of trust and this idea of working across sectors.
I love that whole concept of treating others how you want to be treated, and then being able to build those linkages and networking. It's really about, communities raising children and like bringing the community together. So really can relate to that and want us to do a lot more of that in Canada. Now that you've been leading the Forum for Community Solutions and the Opportunity Youth Forum for nearly a decade, what do you see as the opportunities and challenges of advancing opportunity youth? And what progress has your team made? So you spoke about, some of those challenges about having, for 20, but then how do you actually be able to advance and accelerate that work? And I would love to know if you have any specific stories that have inspired you and keep motivating you to work. And to everyone listening in the chat, I'm seeing your comments, loving to see people from so many different provinces and territories represented. Melody's got a connection to Saskatchewan, so would love to know if anybody's out there from Saskatchewan. Keep those messages coming. Please keep introducing yourselves so we can all get to know each other. Over to you, Melody.
Sure. Again, another great question. A minute ago, I touched on the fact that we often found that we were program rich and system poor. So we felt like to move forward, we'd have to do a few different things. One, work in this cross-sector fashion. Two, to think about systems change with equity being at the center of our work, and recognizing the disproportionate disadvantages that face so many of the young adults that we were working with, and also to focus on narrative change. Even the way that people talked about and thought about the young people that we were working with and in partnership with. So for a long time, people talked about disconnected youth or disadvantaged youth. We very consciously, in partnership with these young adults, started to use the narrative and use the language of opportunity youth, seeing young people as being assets to their communities, not as people who were disconnected, which also meant that we were focusing on the problem, which were systems that were disconnected, systems that were holding problems in place, not young people that were holding problems in place. So the work of the collaboratives that we started, they're now 27 communities in 17 different states in the US, was started to build these pathways, again, with young people at the table with us, from education, secondary to post-secondary, to a family wage sustaining job and career. So thinking about those who had dropped out of high school who needed to be reconnected, those who may have finished high school but needed to go on and get a post-secondary credential of some sort, and then working with employers, so both the supply side but also the demand side, so that we could build on-ramps into an employment for these young people. So that was a really important part of our work. In doing that, we created a learning committee learning community for these collaboratives, so that we could learn from one another, learn from one another's mistakes, and as we were saying at the top of our conversation, leapfrog over the mistakes. I don't need to make the same mistake that someone has already learned about in another part of the country. Learning from one another so that we could build these stronger pathways for young adults.
I actually like the concept of a learning committee as well.
Right.
And it's fascinating because you don't know what you don't know. And even
Mhm.
sometimes the terminologies I use, I've got a great diversity of perspectives and experiences within my team. And something that I'm using today means something entirely different to a whole different generation. So really, that whole concept of a learning committee, I also like, but learning community, we
Right.
should all be part of learning communities. And so, it's been interesting because you are engaging young people, and it's really been about bringing them into this work. So is
Mhm.
there a definition of what it means to engage youth leadership in this work? And I would also ask, like, how do you involve that with youth leadership, right? So how are we getting them to really take over and then being able to ensure that the ladder is being left down, right? So oftentimes we like to create these divisions, people will rise above and we leave everyone else kind of behind. But really
Mhm.
there's been this like empowerment and enabling of wanting to bring people along. So would love to know how this work is related to equity and inclusion, and then how you're defining youth leadership and how we're building youth leaders.
Yeah, yeah. And you're exactly right, Bardish. I mean, this is so central to our work. And if we, older adults didn't realize that, the young adults and youth that we're working with have a phrase that they use with us, and they say, nothing about us without us. So you can't make decisions. Exactly, exactly. You can't make decisions about our life without us at the table. And who better to help design these pathways to understand the challenges, to understand and reflect on what's working, than youth and young adults themselves. So that is central to our work. We at the Aspen Institute, we have Opportunity Youth, former Opportunity Youth that are part of our staff. And all of our collaboratives across the country are working and building tables that include young adults at those tables. And so we think about this on a continuum, and you can start with the idea that, we kind of customer service, like, we talk to young adults and find out what they think. Or we can take another step forward and we have representation of young adults as a part of the collaboratives, as a part of the conversations. You can take another step where young adults are part of the advocacy and the decision making. And then you can take the final step, the most fulsome way of including young adults, and they are part of making decisions and making change and policy decision making. So we think about our journey along that continuum, and different communities are in different places, but in all places, that is a primary goal and strategy for us. And the last thing I'll say is, in doing that, there are things that we try to be really conscious of. One of them is adultism, the sense that adults know better, adults are best prepared, adults, know what's going on, and young people don't. Being conscious of that. And some of our collaboratives have been very honest in saying, we were headed down that road and we stopped ourselves and we reorganized with young people to deal with that challenge. Also, lack of adult preparation, being able to engage appropriately with young adults and training for that. And also professional development for young adults to help them develop their voice and their advocacy skills. And then finally, thinking about storytelling, places where young adults can talk about their lives, their challenges, without revisiting the trauma, and also feeling like they're controlling their narratives. So those are the different kinds of things that we've been thinking about and working on.
I really like the fact that it, like, COVID-19 has impacted the whole world, and all Canadians, all Americans alike, and disproportionately certain segments. And, young people, when our government was talking about social distancing, it was young people who said, no, we need to keep 6 feet apart, 2 meters apart. So we need to physically distance, but we can be socially connected. We can use technology for good. And they were dropping off tablets to, their loved ones, including grandparents, and like bridging that intergenerational gap. And as much as some people were uncomfortable with it, it was really about allowing them to lead the way. And that's something, since we took office in 2015, the Prime Minister has been set on ensuring that youth voices be heard. And that's why the concept of nothing about us without us is so relevant in so many different ways. And I think that's where, the Prime Minister set up the Prime Minister's Youth Council. So we're able to hear from voices from across the country. We engage with young people and have the first youth policy in Canada. We have a youth secretariat so that youth can actually engage directly with government and help lead the way for their futures, because it is about their futures and where they want the country to go. And then we also now have a commitment to ensure that there's at least one youth voice on boards. So this is part of the work that I get to do, and it really speaks to a lot of what you're doing and like tangible steps that will actually help transform the way our systems work.
Yeah, that's just brilliant. I mean, that idea of a youth secretariat and youth presence on boards. I mean, you all are further ahead than we are on steps like that. And it's an interesting idea. I mean, I feel like we'll be able to learn from your experience and think about how to do that here at the federal level. I mean, I have seen that in cities or on the local level, but thinking about that at the federal level is really, really powerful.
And I think that's where we get to learn from each other. I always say you can pick your friends, but you can't pick your family. And when it comes to our American cousins to the south, we're family. We share the largest border of any two countries. And there is so many similarities and opportunities to be able to work together. And I see the comment from Paul, always two youth on boards. One is pressure to represent all youth. It's also about networking and listening and engaging. And I can understand it's not about pressure, but it's a step in the right direction. And perhaps we should be augmenting that. And I think that's where we want to hear from young people in the country. We want to hear from people who are on boards as to how do we improve these opportunities. And Melody, I just want to know if you can reflect on the future for youth. Is it in prosperity or peril, peril or promise? And where do you see the work that you're doing going, and who benefits from this work?
Sure. Well, this ties into what we were just talking about. There are so many challenges that are facing young people. And there are things that older adults have done and are leaving behind those challenges for young people, which is why it's so important to have them on a youth secretariat or it's having them on a board, because we need their brain power, we need their energy, we need their innovation, because these are challenges they will have to deal with. Everything from the climate to issues of equity and economic insecurity. And obviously, we've all been dealing for over the past year with COVID-19 and its implications with regard to healthcare. And the ripple of that effect of that cannot be underestimated. We, with Opportunity Youth and our measures, we had seen that we were starting to see the numbers decline of those Opportunity Youth who were dealing with disconnected systems, who didn't have access to education and employment. Once COVID-19 hit, we saw a number of millions, in fact, of Opportunity Youth who literally just dropped out of the system because of the economic issues, because of employment related issues. And now one of the organizations that measures these numbers for us is saying, while you had been able to drop down to, I think, maybe around 5 or 6 million, we expect the number to go up, I think, to about 9 million. 9 million young adults just over the course of the last year. So these are significant challenges. And while we've made 2 steps forward, we've also made steps back. But there are things that give me hope. I mean, in that same period of time, we've been able to partner with a number of foundations, in some cases, literally just to think about how we build capacity to help young people navigate the COVID-19 circumstances to access benefits that they need. In other instances, working with tribal communities, First Nations communities to help with data and measurement, which it helps to inform their strategies. So those are also things that have happened over the course of the last year. But the thing that I have to say gives me the most hope are the young adults that we work with themselves. There's an organization called Opportunity Youth United, and they wrote this beautiful mission statement a number of years ago, and they talked about the fact that they had benefited from working with a lot of adults and organizations that saw them for the assets that they are. But they also recognized that they had been dealing with trauma that no young person should have to deal with, the kinds of things that we were talking about before. And they went on to say that a thriving society has to invest in its youth and its children, that they have found a way to forgive those who had hurt them, and that they were strong, that they were resilient. And they said, and this is a quote, "We are smart, we are united, we aim to be a positive force for good in the world, motivated by love and guided by a strong moral and spiritual compass, that we believe that we can create a society in which it is recognized that all people are created equal, where there is liberty and freedom, opportunity and responsibility, justice and love for all. That is the America we aim to create in our lifetimes." That's what gives me hope.
That is tremendous. And I have goosebumps. And this is what it's about. Like, my Canada is an inclusive Canada, and I really want to live in a world where each individual is able to be their true authentic self and contribute in meaningful ways and realize their potential. And I think that's what's so exciting about the work that you're doing. And I always say that the best natural resource that we have is our people. And if we actually allow that renewable resource to shine, then we can get to that vision, and make sure it's not just a dream, but it's reality. And that's where I think, as we continue to build youth futures, would love to know what your ideas are that you have that might motivate Canada to end poverty for youth, to actually bring more people along. We've got this beautiful debate and conversation taking place in the chat, and that's what's really exciting. And you see comments like empowering, and I want to not just empower but enable individuals to help be part of the creation of this truly inclusive Canada and world and system. So would love to know, like, where you think the future is headed. What do you think? Any advice or guidance for Canada? Opportunities for us to work together too are always welcome.
Sure, and would love that. As I said, so much to learn from the work that you are doing, that the Prime Minister is doing. I think the motivation is, as it is, for us, that we share this one, that this is a moral issue. This is a moral issue. It is wrong to leave young people living in poverty that undermines their potential, that does not allow them to live out their potential. And on top of that, it's an economic mystery to me why we wouldn't address this issue. Right now, we are playing the game with half the team still, on the bench. There are so many young people, young adults who have so much to give across sectors, civically, to their communities, the families that they can build, and to give them an opportunity to fully participate in civic society, to fully contribute to the economic well-being of Canada and the United States and the globe. Why wouldn't we do that? That's just, my mother always said, we don't use words like stupid, but that's just stupid. It doesn't make any sense. It's ignorant. So that motivates me. But what also motivates me is the progress that's being made. I look at the evaluation of the work that we're doing here across our 27 collaboratives. And what we're seeing is that we're building out capacity in these collaboratives. And that means that they are gaining, and this is measured, convening power. They're able to draw more stakeholders into the work that they're doing. That data is being used more effectively, and across the board, it's being used as a call to action to bring more people in. There are challenges around raising resources, but what we are seeing is that we're able to leverage public dollars to help with, to gain private sector dollars. We need more of that for the backbones in these different collaboratives. And we're also starting to see signs of systemic change. We see programs that are focused on equity and programmatic changes, better delivery of services, greater delivery of services to young people. And we're also seeing the foundation being laid for policy change, which then really starts to get you to scale. So we know there's a moral reason, there's an economic reason, but we also know this can be done. And I would hope that that would be motivation both for us in the States and for you all in Canada as well.
It sure is. Love the concept of collecting data and disaggregated data, because it's important that we be able to measure. And sometimes you don't always get it right, but how do you course correct to make sure that you stay focused on the work that we're trying to do, but also just, flexible enough that we can stay current with the times. And I think that's something that adults sometimes forget they were youth once. So how do you really, allow that spirit to shine? I got involved, as Paul mentioned, in politics when I was 13 years old, and some of the things that I was fighting for as an adult, I might not have, because I was so like borderless. And it's really important that we go back to ensuring that we're engaging with young people, especially when it comes to social policies. Like I fought for same-sex marriages well before the Supreme Court of Canada ruled on it. And how would the world not need more love, right? Like, of course we do. I know we're running out of time, but I want to ask really quickly as to, in Canada, we're trying to have data available by default because it's paid by the public purse so that people can access that information and be able to know where we're at. Where do you keep data and how do you make it available? And also I would ask is, how do people get to know the work that you're doing? Like, how do you continue broadening that network so that it doesn't feel like, you're alone in that work and then other people can join in?
Great. So I was writing that down so I don't forget. So on data, and data is such a conundrum. It's such a challenge. And I think particularly in the States, I mean, we've got the system where, states are doing their thing, cities are doing their thing, the federal government's doing its thing. And in many places there are, particularly in the education system, you see that there are barriers to the sharing and the collecting and the sharing of information. So some of our work has been devoted to trying to address those kinds of barriers to create better data sharing. On the federal level, I also serve as a senior fellow for an organization called Results for America that focuses on evidence-based, data-driven policymaking. And we have been working to encourage federal departments and agencies to better collect their data, to your point, to make it available so that people can access it. Because it's one thing to have lots of huge data sets that someone looks at and goes, and what does this mean? It's another thing to have data sets presented in a way that people can more easily access them. And we have been encouraging them, one, helping to provide tools to lobby or to advocate before Congress on this work, getting more congressional advocates for it, but then working those departments and agencies to say, this is what the federal standard of excellence looks like for data collection and data presentation. And similarly, we've gotten support from Michael Bloomberg's, former Mayor Bloomberg's foundation to do that kind of work in cities and also to do that work in the states. So it's an ongoing effort. With regard to your second question, how do you let people know about your work? We, as I mentioned, are a network of 27 collaboratives in 17 states, but we see ourselves as part of a network and of networks, part of a larger movement that focuses on opportunity youth. And so there are times when we will bring together or plan our conferences with other organizations that are doing similar work so that we can literally have thousands of people in the same place, connecting with one another, collaborating with one another. And we think about leveraging the work of other organizations so that we're sharing this information more broadly. We also created the Collective Impact Forum, which is a place where people can go online and learn about not only for work around opportunity youth, but how collective impact is being used in a number of different ways.
Melody, Paul Bourne was absolutely correct. I could talk to you for days. I think one of the things I've been also encouraging amongst my teams is the carbon copy field in emails. I think it's the most underutilized field. So when you're having a conversation with someone else, copy me in so that we can be part of it. And I really love the work that you're doing. And I love the community that you're building and shaping. And our time together is done until the next phase of
Oh.
this program. We're going to bring Paul Bourne into it. I can understand also, Melody, just on the comments in regards to like Canada as a confederation. So we've got different levels of government. We have different jurisdictions. But I always say, as much as the world needs more Canada, Canada needs more Waterloo. And I say that for many different reasons, including tremendous people like the co-CEO of the Tamarack Institute and director of Vibrant Communities, Paul Bourne. I just want you to know, Paul, that my team has really enjoyed working with your team as well. A special shout out to Justin and making this opportunity really just shine and showcase. Conversations like this are essential, and people like you are making them happen. So I just want to give my thanks and appreciation to you, and thank you for broadening my network today by an additional person, that Melody Barnes, and this amazing chat that I will make sure I get those notes to my team so that we can continue working together. Over to you, Paul.
Well, and thank you so much, Bardish, and thanks for all the work that you do, not just in our community, but for our country. It's beautiful. And I just was feeling so honored to be here at this table with the two of you, with all of your accomplishments and your intense thinking about this issue. And I keep thinking over to May, huh? So on May the 4th and 5th, we have this conference called The End of Poverty. And on May 6th, both of you are going to be speaking, and then there's going to be a panel. And you're going to be on a panel with youth. So they're going to be engaging with these ideas with you. And I look forward to that so much, because it's a bit of a journey, huh? It's a bit of a kind of an understanding. And yet there's nothing more important than building youth futures. And what that means, often to me, it means ending poverty for youth. How do we make sure that youth achieve opportunity, but that don't end up living in poverty for a good part of their lives? And I think we can create those kind of policies and those kinds of systems and structures. Melody, we got lots of questions here, and Bardish, so jump in together. And it's well over 100 in the chat box, so it's kind of overwhelming. If you find one that you want to talk about, bring it forward. But Melody, first of all, we can't let you go on this. Delphine from Saskatchewan says there's 3 of us sitting in the room, and you brought up Saskatoon, and I think they all just cheered. What's your connection? If you could they're asking if you could make that connection.
Sure, absolutely. My husband, Marlon Buckner, grew up in Saskatoon. He was born in Los Angeles, and he and his mom moved back to her hometown of Saskatoon, Saskatchewan. And he grew up there. He got his BA and his master's degree at University of Saskatchewan, moved to the States to do his doctoral work here at William and Mary. But before COVID, we were back and forth in Saskatoon quite a bit. And so the Buckner, the Inns family in Saskatoon are relatives and who I adore and enjoy going back there. I remember the very first time I went there, it was in August, and we just started dating. And, I live in the South, where it's easily 99 degrees and 98% humidity in the summer. And we got there, and it was this beautiful 80-degree day with like 40% humidity. And one of his cousins said, "Oh my God, it's just awful here." I was like, "No, I'm going to move here. This is spectacular." So we enjoy going back to Saskatoon and look forward to getting back there once we can get across the border again.
Absolutely wonderful. The lovely connection. An honorary Canadian.
Thank
So
you.
both Melody and Bardish, Holly, one of our participants, um, you know, this talk about cradle to career. But then, she was bringing up this interesting point. How do we do that without kind of the career being a career that isn't a living wage? Like, how do we create that larger scope so that the kind of careers that are coming for young people are the kind of careers that will help them to thrive?
Sure. Well, I can jump in and start. I mean, that has always been at the center of the work that we're doing. And so when we talk about the pathways that we're building, few things. One, we talk about a pathway to a family wage sustaining job. So not just any job, not just any wage. And with the idea that young
Right.
people are building and developing careers. And so the credentials necessary for them to be able to do that are built into the pathways or the concept of pathways that we want to develop. We're also sensitive to not creating cookie cutter models. We have several tribal First Nations communities that are part of our network. And so we've been in conversation with them about what that means in their communities as well. It also means that we work with employers. And, in many cases, that has been some of the most challenging work. And there are many employers who say, yeah, we want to work with opportunity youth, but making sure that they are prepared to do that. For young people, sometimes this may be their first job or other kinds of challenges, so that we want to make sure they're able to do that and to do that successfully. I used to be on the board of an organization called Year Up that does a really good job of that and putting in place the kinds of supports for employers and for young people to be able to do that. But in addition to that, thinking about the wage related issues that we're talking about and the kinds of employers that we're working with. And I know from talking to opportunity youth, they're sensitive to, where am I coming in on this ladder? Will this be a dead end job? Is there a permanent ceiling above me? And we have been working hard to create an on-ramp to good jobs and also jobs that have a career ladder up for opportunity youth.
I would just chime in and say that, and I love the fact that you brought in Melody employers, right? Because there is really about that mentorship bit and really being able to sponsor and bring people along. In Canada, one of the programs we brought out was the Canada Child Benefit. And that was actually because you don't get to pick the family you're born into. And so you don't know what resources might be available. In my family, my grandparents immigrated from India. Never would they have imagined that I'd be putting my name on a ballot, let alone elected, let alone at the cabinet table. But when communities raise children, and that's why I really do like the work of Opportunity Youth, it's really about all of us investing in these futures because it benefits all of us. And I think that's where the concept of a high tide lifts all boats, the national housing strategy, making sure that people have a safe, affordable place to call home. But then there's also programs like the Youth Employment Skills Strategy. And one of the comments I always ask in the Canada Summer Jobs Program, the comments I always ask is, who's obtaining these jobs? So make sure we're collecting that data to ensure that the people who might not always have access are also part of the ones who are succeeding in this work, because that's how I think we help develop those careers. And something we've always found challenging in Canada is the trades, the skills trades. So we want, many people, especially if you immigrate to Canada, you want your kids to go to university, great education, but don't always recognize the value and importance of college as well as the trades. And those careers are amazing careers. And no matter how much technology comes into place, if that's what you love, why not let somebody love their job? Because they will be employed and they will be meaningfully employed.
Yeah. Yep. And one more thing, when you said that, it pinged this for me. One other thing that a number of organizations have started working on is this idea of, for what job do you really need what credential? Because often certain jobs have been identified as you need a 4-year degree for this job, and you don't. People are replicating themselves and their own experiences, but if we really look at the skills necessary, we can open up even more jobs to more young adults, older adults, to more young adults with certain kinds of certifications and post-secondary associate's degrees, for example, that may not have a 4-year degree, but that 4-year degree isn't needed. So we also need to think about that.
Wow, I'm mesmerized by all the questions that are coming through this box, and they're coming so fast that's hard to keep up with them. I think there's been a lot of debate around just the whole idea of sort of talking about opportunity youth. And it's interesting because I guess, it becomes a bit of a label for some people. So there's been a number of questions there. It seems really interesting. And there's some really interesting one around systems change. Someone talks about systems change. They didn't give their name. Work in East Scarborough in creating pathways with anchor institutions, hospitals and universities, which are place-based employers who are creating good jobs and building supportive pathways so that people in poverty can access the jobs and to grow in the local communities. Another, I think, really important kind of understanding and looking for those types of partners generally. Have you found in the US, Melody, that you've been able to find major employers that have come on side, and that I often think of the role of employers in all of this. It's not just government that's responsible. It's not just local government or federal governments, but there's also the idea of employers taking this on and understanding how important it is to create jobs that specifically are designed for young people.
Yes, we have. It's a challenge, as I mentioned before, because we want more, but we have been able to find major employers. A number of years ago, Howard Schultz, he was still CEO at Starbucks, helped to launch a program that we started to work with at Aspen. And he literally was calling his fellow CEOs to say, this is important, and we have to do this, and bring your companies, bring your chief human resource officers and others to the table so that we can think about being a part of the pathway building process. Also, I referenced the board. I was on the organization Year Up, and they tend to focus. There are a number of sectors in which they are placing young people after training, but the IT sector, the healthcare sector in particular, the hospitality sector is another growing area, but we're talking about, and financial services. We're talking about large financial services organizations, companies, and also significant technology and IT companies, or the IT function in large companies, and placing a number of young people there. And the measure that they are using for success isn't, wow, we got 20 young people a summer internship. It's we're scaling the numbers, and B, it's a summer internship that then turns into full-time employment. So a fellow member of that board with me, actually not one, but a couple of people were former Year Up graduates who had come through, who are now managing sizable departments and numbers of people. We've had former Year Up graduates call and say, now I'm in a position at company X that I'm able to hire. And I know I want to hire opportunity youth from this program. So we are seeing employers participate, but we need more.
Fabulous. A lot of interesting questions here, just generally about policy change. And we've got a wonderful question here, just generally about this idea of the voting age, lowering the voting age. And I know it's kind of an interesting one, Bardish, that you're working on here in Canada around youth. But the other one is, and I know we've heard, President Biden talk about the possibility of, doing something about student debt, in America. And so there's questions here about, when we talk about opportunity, the opportunity for youth to have more political clout in Canada, and also that they're not sort of moving into careers with this crippling debt that they have, which, of course, causes people to stop dreaming, and maybe causes them to kind of just take whatever comes along, right? Thoughts around that, like just generally about policy changes that we may need to think about in terms of making opportunities for youth more real.
I'll jump in first just because I want everyone to know, don't ever believe the only way to get involved or have a say is by voting. Voting is essential. And lowering the voting age, there is a senator right now who is actually advancing her Senate private members bill. So you're able to definitely get involved with that. And we want to hear from you as to what your thoughts are. And in Canada, diversity is our strength. And that includes the diversity of opinions and perspectives and regions and languages, and the list goes on. And so I just want to say, I think there is some ability, even when you think about high school, and as you're determining what you want to do post high school, sometimes it feels like your decisions are made, but actually being able to actually, have honest conversations with the individual whose future is in question. And that might mean, taking a year to explore. And that's something that, our country's spoken about, but there is a huge stigma attached to that, thinking that if a student does not go straight into post-secondary, oh, their future will be lost. But could it actually broaden their horizons? When Canadians travel the world and become global citizens, we don't always have to see that as a loss. We can actually see that as an opportunity. It really is in the eyes of the beholder. I also want to just say student debt. One of the things our government has done is actually we want to waive interest for up to 6 months. So when you graduate from post-secondary and you have when you used to be that you didn't have to pay back for 6 months, and you didn't have interest, but somewhere along the lines interest got snuck in. So the day after you graduated, you haven't even realized that you've actually graduated. There's interest 2 days after you graduate. There's interest on top of interest, and you don't have to pay back. And then back to my original point, I got involved in politics when I was 13 years old. So never hesitate to get involved in the political process. It might be through an organized political party. It might be through advancing a petition and having your say. It might be writing to your elected officials. It might be volunteering, and the list goes on. But there's many ways to engage, so definitely do. And if you want to be part of the conversation about lowering the voting age, do it. One of the things our government did was actually equip Elections Canada to start educating Canadian citizens at the age of 16 to actually know about the voting process, because sometimes people find it overwhelming when you're 18 and you go to vote. So people choose not to vote, but it's essential that we cast our ballot. And we can never forget the men and women in uniform who have sacrificed their lives to ensure that we have that right and privilege.
Lovely. Hey, I'm going to jump in with another question, mainly because Cassandra's question was upvoted 5 times in the last few minutes. And it talks about how is the government dealing with opportunity for youth to join boards. It's very interesting that you had mentioned that, and I saw a whole bunch of comments come in, probably a dozen of them right away. So people are really interested in this. I never heard of these opportunities when I was a youth, but also now when I'm supporting youth in the community. So is it still that kind of an open-ended idea that organizations aren't involving youth on their boards? And your thoughts on how to advance that? Either one of you, both of you, what are you seeing? What are you thinking?
No, Bardish, this is like I said in our conversation, this is a new concept for me and in the state. So I'm curious to learn more.
So I'll make sure that we share that information. So anything that is federally regulated at a federal board, the government of Canada has some ability to be able to kind of help create what that decision-making table can look like. So it is part of my mandate commitments, and I can provide Paul you an update as to how many boards have youth representatives on them. We have an open, transparent appointment process now. So that, and Scott's just put the link there so that you can put your names forward. And that's where with COVID, there's pros and cons because, you know, there's still a contingent of the population in Canada that does not have access to the internet. But if you do, you can be virtually in any place that you need to be almost now. So it really is important that we have voices represented. So that's one of the commitments. And my goal is to see every federally regulated board. And hopefully that means that, you know, the private sector will also follow suit. So when Canada had gender parity at the cabinet table, we actually saw that resonate with other sectors of the economy. So we're hoping this is another way of encouraging others to also do that.
Wonderful. Hey, we are at our time here. Just quickly, Tamarack has youth on our board of directors, and we are going to be seeking another one next year. So if people are interested, do reach out to us, and we'll love to have a chat with you. I can't say thank you enough. I wish this wasn't ending. I wish we had another half hour to talk together, to learn together. I also long for the time when the two of you are in a room together. You are such tremendous leaders. You are both so inspiring. And I'm just really grateful that you've committed your lives to this. It's making Canada, it's making the United States better places for young people. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much for inviting me. And Bardish, what a pleasure to meet you. Paul, wonderful to be with you again. And I'm looking forward to May. So thank you.
Likewise, a pleasure. Thank you, Paul, for making this happen. Melody, I can't wait till the next time. I hope everyone watching keeps well and safe. Please take care of yourselves and each other.
Thank you so much.